Chapter 9 The Legend of Lamech's Sons and the Pillars. The traditional history of Masonry now begins in the legend of the craft, with an account of the three sons of Lamech, to whom is attributed the discovery of all sciences. But the most interesting part of the legend is that in which the story is told of two pillars erected by them, and on which they had inscribed the discoveries they had made, so that after the impending destruction of the world, the knowledge which they had attained might be communicated to the post-Diluvian race. This story is not mentioned in the Bible, but is first related by Josephus in the following words. They also, the posterity of Seth, were the inventors of that peculiar sort of wisdom which is concerned with the heavenly bodies and their order, and that their inventions might not be lost before they were sufficiently known, upon Adam's prediction that the world was to be destroyed at one time by the force of fire, and at another time by the violence and quantity of water, they made two pillars, the one of brick, the other of stone. They inscribed their discoveries on them both, that in case the pillar of brick should be destroyed by the flood, the pillar of stone might remain and exhibit those discoveries to mankind, and also inform them that there was another pillar of brick erected by them. Now this remains in the land of Syriad to this day. Footnote: Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, B.I., Chapter 2, Whiston's translation. Although this traditional narrative has received scarcely any estimation from scholars, and Josephus has been accused either of incredible audacity or frivolous credulity. Footnote: Incredibile, audacia, aut futile, credulite, usus est, is the language of Ornius in his Geographia Vetus. But Owen, Theologomenia, Lib. 4, c. 2, 6, although inclined to doubt the story, thinks it not impossible if we suppose hieroglyphics, like those of the Egyptians, to have been used for the inscriptions instead of letters. Still, it has formed the foundation on which the Masonic legend of the pillars has been erected. But in passing from the Jewish historian to the legend maker of the craft, the form of the story has been materially altered. In Josephus, the construction of the pillars is attributed to the posterity of Seth, in the legend to the children of Lamech. Whence was this important alteration derived? The Dowland and all subsequent manuscripts cite the 4th chapter of Genesis as authority for the legend, but in Genesis no mention is made of these pillars. But in the Cook manuscript, which is of an earlier date, we can trace the true source of the legend in its Masonic form, which could not be done until that manuscript was published. To the Cook manuscript has been accorded the date of 1490. It differs materially in form and substance from the Hallowell manuscript, which preceded it by at least a century, and is the first of the old constitutions in which anything like the present form of the legend appears. The way in which the legend of Lamech is treated by it enables us to discover the true source whence this part of the legend of the craft was derived. It must be remarked, in the first place, that the Hallowell poem The earliest of the old manuscripts, the date of which is not later than the close of the 14th century, contains no allusion to this legend of Lamech and his children. The Cook manuscript is the first one in which we find the details. The Cook manuscript is assigned, as has been before said, to the end of the 15th century, about the year 1490. In it, the legend of the pillars is given, from line 253 to 284, in the following words. And these three brethren, the sons of Lamech, aforesaid, had knowledge that God would take vengeance for sin, other by fire, water, and they had greater care how they might do to save the science that they found, and they took their counsel together, and by all their wits they said that were manner of stone of such virtue that the one would never burn, and that stone is called marble, and that other stone that would not sink in water, and that stone is named laterus. Footnote: from the Latin later, a brick. And so they decided to write all the science that they had found. Footnote: it is to be regretted that in nearly all the recent printed copies of the old manuscripts, the editors have substituted the double F for the capital F, which is in the original. The scribes, or amanuenses of the Middle Ages, were fond of employing capital letters often when there was really no use for them, but they never indulged in the folly of unnecessarily doubling initial letters. What the modern editors of the manuscripts have mistaken for a double F was really the FF, or FF, the capital F, of the scribes. This is not of much importance, but even in small things it is well to be accurate. Brother Hugon, in his edition of the old charges, is, as we might expect, generally correct in this particular. But sometimes, perhaps inadvertently, he has printed the double instead of the capital letter. In this stones, if that God would take vengeance by fire, that the marble should not burn. And if God send vengeance by water, that the other should not drown. And so they prayed their elder brother Jobal that would make two pillars of these two stones, that is to say, of marble and of laterus, and that he would write it, the two pillars, all the science and craft that all they had found, and so he did. Comparing this legend with the passage that has been cited from Josephus, it is evident that the legend maker had not derived his story from the Jewish historian. The latter attributes the building of the pillars to the children of Seth, while the former assigns it to the children of Lamech. How are we to explain this change in the form of the legend? We can only solve the problem by reference to a work almost contemporary with the legendist. Ranulph Higden, a Benedictine monk of St. Werburgh's Abbey in Chester, who died in the latter half of the 14th century, wrote a universal history, completed in his own times under the title of Polychronicon. The Polychronicon was written in the Latin language, but was translated into English by Sir John Trevisa. This translation, with several verbal alterations, was published in London by William Caxton in 1482, about 10 years before the date of the Cook manuscript. With this work, the compiler of the legend in the Cook manuscript appears to have been familiar. He cites it repeatedly as authority for his statements. Thus he says, "Ye shall understand that among all the crafts of the world of man, craft Masonry hath the most notable and most part of this science geometry, as is noted and said in Storial, as in the Bible, and in the Master of Stories, and in Polychronico, a chronicle printed." Now the legend of Lamech's children is thus given in Caxton's edition of the translation of Higden's Polychronicon. Footnote, Book 2, Chapter 5.